London, October 14th, 1996. The Thames moved the way it always did at dusk. Slow, dark, not interested in anyone standing at its edge. Michael Jackson had been in the city for 3 days, and in less than 24 hours he would walk onto the Wembley stage in front of 72,000 people. But that evening he was alone on the Southbank, wearing a dark coat, a flat cap pulled low, and a pair of plain glasses he had picked up at a chemist near the hotel. No security, no assistant, no one trailing 2 steps behind making sure the world didn't get too close. He did this when he could. The disguise was never going to fool anyone who was genuinely looking. But most people on most evenings were not genuinely looking. They had their own things going on. That was the thing about cities. They were full of people moving at a speed that didn't leave much room for noticing what was directly in front of them. He walked with his hands in his pockets. The river was to his left. He passed a food cart and a man selling prints from a folding table. He had been walking more these past few months. The history tour was the biggest production of his life and also the loneliest. 70,000 people in every stadium, and not a single one of them knew who he actually was. He heard it before he found it. Ben, acoustic guitar. The notes came up through the general noise of the evening, slow and careful, each one given its full weight before the next arrived. He stopped walking before he knew he had stopped. The song had lived in his body for 24 years. He had recorded it at 13 in a Hollywood studio, wearing a suit half an inch too long in the sleeve, while adults watched through the control room glass with the look they got when something was going better than planned. He hadn't been nervous that day. He'd been tired, the way he was always tired back then, and the song had felt like the one honest thing in a schedule full of people telling him where to stand and who to become. The producer had asked for a third take because the emotion was too much. Michael had thought about that note many times since. Too much. He turned toward the sound. The man sat on a folded square of cardboard pressed against the riverside wall, a guitar across his lap and a case open at his feet. He looked to be in his early 50s. His coat was dark green and heavy, worn through at both elbows in the way that speaks of years rather than seasons. His boots had been repaired at least once. The hands, though, were something apart from the rest of him. They moved across the guitar with a quiet certainty that doesn't come from practice alone. It comes from a kind of repetition that stops being conscious somewhere along the way and becomes closer to reflex. His eyes were closed. His lips moved slightly with the words. He wasn't playing for the people walking past. He wasn't playing for the few coins in the open case. He was playing for someone who wasn't there, which was the only explanation for the way it sounded. Michael stayed back and listened. He thought about the last 3 years. The 1993 allegations had taken something from him he still couldn't name precisely. Not just reputation, though that too. Something more interior. A sense that people were seeing whatever version of him was most convenient rather than actually seeing him. He had put everything into history. 2 discs, 30 songs, every feeling he had about what it meant to exist at that volume and still feel fundamentally unseen. The tour was working. He had never felt more alone. He walked forward and stopped near the guitar case. He listened to the last verse. The man played the way you play something you've played 10,000 times. Not from memory exactly, but from somewhere below memory, where the music stops being notes and becomes something you do the way you breathe. When the final chord faded, Michael crouched and placed a 50-pound note in the open case. The man opened his eyes. He looked at the money first. Then he looked up. He studied Michael's face the way people study a face they almost recognize but can't quite place. Carefully, without committing to anything. Michael kept his expression easy. Most people talk themselves out of it. The glasses helped. The cap helped. The simple fact of being somewhere unexpected helped most of all. "That was beautiful," Michael said. "What made you choose that one?" The man looked back down at his guitar. He had the manner of someone who had stopped wasting energy on suspicion without ever quite releasing it entirely. "I play it every day," he said. His voice was low and a little rough in the way voices get when they aren't used often. "Been playing it since '72. Since it came out? Since my son was born." He adjusted his grip on the neck of the guitar. His mom heard it on the radio the week she brought him home from hospital. said it sounded like it was written for him. A pause. She wasn't wrong. What's his name? Ben. He said it plainly, without softening it in either direction, which made it land harder than sentiment would have. He's 24 now, lives up in Edinburgh, I think. We haven't spoken in 9 years. Michael sat down on the low wall nearby. Not because it was comfortable, because something in what the man had said put a weight in his legs that standing didn't seem like the right answer to. I play it so he knows I'm still here, the man said, looking out at the river and the lights coming on in the buildings across it. Even though he can't hear it, he probably doesn't think about me at all. But I play it anyway because it's the only thing I still have that belongs to both of us. Michael looked at him directly. What's your name? Bobby. Robert Harmon. People call me Bobby. Michael extended his hand. Bobby shook it. His grip was firm, the fingertips on his left hand worn smooth the way a guitarist's always are. Michael, he said. Bobby studied him once more. Something passed across his expression and then settled. You look familiar. I get that sometimes. Bobby seemed to decide that was sufficient and let it go. He was from Brixton, he said. His father had played guitar, and Bobby had learned the way children learn things they love, by watching and by not being able to stop themselves. He'd done session work through the 70s, backing tracks mostly, the kind where your name doesn't appear anywhere. Then the industry changed around him, the way industries do, and the work dried up, and life had a way of filling the space that music left behind with things that were harder to get out from under. His marriage ended in '87. He described it the way people describe weather after enough time, something that moved through and left things different. Margaret had taken their son, which was the practical decision and also the thing that had broken something in him that hadn't been fully reassembled since. He still wasn't sure whether not fighting it was the worst decision he had ever made. By the mid-90s, he had been on the street long enough that the street had started to feel permanent. 8 years by the time Michael sat beside him that October evening. Michael listened without interrupting. People assumed he couldn't, that someone who had spent 40 years performing couldn't be quiet in a conversation. But silence was one of the few things he had always been able to find, even in the loudest rooms. She chose the name? He asked. Said the song made her feel like someone was looking out for him? Bobby ran his thumb across the strings without pressing them, a gesture so habitual he almost certainly didn't notice he was doing it. I never argued with her about music. Michael said nothing for a moment. He was thinking about a studio in Hollywood in 1972. 13 years old, a suit that didn't fit. He was thinking about all the places that song had traveled, all the moments it had shown up in. None of it had ever landed in him the way this did. A man on a piece of cardboard on the Southbank, playing the same 4 minutes every day for 24 years to a son who couldn't hear him. He stood up. Bobby looked at him. I need to tell you something, Michael said. Hear the whole sentence before you react to it. Bobby waited. I recorded that song in 1972. I was 13 years old. He took the glasses off. He pushed the cap back slightly. Bobby went still. He looked at Michael's face with the glasses removed, and this time there was no almost about it. Neither of them spoke. The traffic moved on the bridge. A group of tourists passed, talking over each other. She brought him home, Bobby finally said. His voice had dropped. She heard your voice on the radio, and she called him Ben. Yes, and I've been playing your song every day for 24 years. I know. To a son who can't hear me. Michael nodded. Bobby pressed his palm flat against the body of the guitar, not gripping it, just resting it there. And you just happened to walk past. I heard you from 50 feet away, Michael said. I stopped because of the way you played it. It didn't sound like a performance. It sounded like a conversation with someone who wasn't there. Bobby looked at the case, at the note, at the coins around it. He was processing something too large to move through quickly, and he wasn't pretending otherwise. They talked for another hour. Bobby asked him what it had actually been like to record the song. Michael told him the honest version, not the one he gave in interviews. The suit that didn't fit, the fatigue, the producer asking for a third take because the emotion was too much. Bobby laughed once, a short and genuine sound, and shook his head slowly. Too much. Right. When Michael finally stood to leave, he made 2 calls, One to the hotel 2 streets away to arrange a room. One to someone he trusted, a person who was good at locating people, and gave her the name Ben Harmon, Edinburgh, born 1972. He said he needed a contact number by tomorrow night. Bobby shook his head at the hotel. Michael said it wasn't charity. He said the song had traveled to places he'd never been, in languages he didn't speak, had found its way into the worst moments of people's lives. The least it could do was cover one room on the Southbank. Bobby picked up his case and stood, and when he stood straight. The next evening, 72,000 people at Wembley Stadium made a sound that has no real comparison in ordinary life. Michael moved through the set as rehearsed. 45 minutes in, he stepped to the front and said something quietly to his musical director. The musical director looked at him with mild surprise, then nodded. What followed wasn't on the set list. The opening notes of Ben came through the system. Acoustic, unhurried, slightly lower in volume than everything before it. The crowd took a moment to recognize it. Then the stadium settled into something quieter, the way large groups sometimes do when they understand something different is being asked of them. Michael sang it the way Bobby had played it the previous evening, not as a performance, as a message to a specific person who might or might not ever hear it. His team asked about it afterward. He didn't give a full explanation. 3 weeks later, a man in Edinburgh answered his phone on a Wednesday evening. He didn't recognize the number on the screen. He answered anyway. The voice on the other end was his father's. The call lasted 4 hours. Bobby told his son about the evening on the Southbank. He told it plainly without embellishment, because embellishment had never been his way. Ben asked questions. He didn't say much about what he was feeling, which was his way, which was also, it turned out, his father's way. But he stayed on the line, and somewhere in those 4 hours, the 9 years between them stopped being the only thing the story was about.